Naruto hummed an eerie tune to himself as he pulled the last weed from the garden. He had finally worked them up to their glory again. Most of the vegetables that had been able to had come back every year, and the flowers had spread like weeds. Even though a year and a half had passed, nothing much besides the garden had changed. He slightly smiled at the large potato plants. They had spread well. The flowers had spread through his entire fenced-off lawn, though he had regretfully had to move them from the entrance of the yard so the hopeful Chunin, who stayed and used the tower, wouldn't destroy them. When he arrived, his whole yard had looked like a magical garden. The forest of death was as dangerous and as creepy as ever, but once you passed his fence, it was a bright bloom of colors. It had looked magical. Leafy vines had grown over the wooden fence, making it look like an 8-foot-tall wall of leaves and vines. He loved it. More vines had also spread up the tower as he had planted a whole bunch around the base, with the same idea in mind. With a warm climate for a year and a half, they had covered the first floor and were moving on to the second. He had to clear the window areas though, and the door areas. Most of the place had been quite dusty also. A small breeze and open windows had fixed that problem though. He had also made a bunch of clones to wash things and sweep. Then another batch of clones had started to clean out the onsen. Only the arena, the few guest rooms on the first floor, and the one lounge/camera room all used in the shooting exam had been relatively clean. Naruto couldn't help but feel a small breeze of joy in his mind and heart as he looked over his garden, his tower, his forest, his home. He loved it. Naruto gazed at the class, watching him warily. His golden hair was pulled in a messy braid with beads made of silver and glass tied in. Even a raven feather tucked in with the beads. His black eye patch was lined with an icy blue that matched his lone eye. He now wore plain black shorts, wooden Geta sandals. His long black coat, which also had icy blue feather designs lining the bottom trim, and a spandex black shirt with wisps of icy blue through it like ice under the coat. Lastly, he wore a necklace around his neck. It was some plain string holding small wooden carved beads to look like feathers and fangs. In his left ear he wore a wolf fang hung from silver wire. He had thinned out a bit more, his body becoming leaner. All his muscles were lean but powerful. He was still slightly short for his age, but he looked older in body and face. Not 14 and a half. His eyes gave the appearance of a hardened shinobi, and his movements were fluid and dangerous. Adorning each cheek were 3 whisker-like marks, black and elegant in design. His skin was a healthy tone, not pale, but not overly tan. All in all, he made for an imposing figure, the kind that attracted attention, but could hide in plain sight. He also gave off a dangerous and feral look. None of the academy kids and many others wouldn't mess with him. He greeted the class with a curt nod, then moved to sit by Hinata Hyuga, as Iruka welcomed him back to the class. As he sat by the shy girl in the last row, he let his coat slip from his shoulders onto the back of the chair. He heard Hinata give an eep and turn red as she gazed at him. You could see all his muscles through his spandex shirt, but that wasn't what caught most eyes. What caught most eyes were the tattoos on his left arm. They wound around his arm in tight coils all the way to his shoulder. Then, on his right wrist was a band of intricate seals. It was about 3 inches thick and done in black and red ink like the other ones. Naruto sent glares at any who stared long. No one was brave enough to ask about the tattoos or where he had been. Naruto watched the girl over folded hands. She was a nervous little thing, always either fidgeting or staying so still you forgot about her. She was shy and timid too, never meeting anyone's eyes and stuttering when spoken to. She was the exact opposite of any Hyuga he had ever met, but that's what caught his eye. She was different. He watched as the rest of the class streamed out to meet their parents after a long day of school. Hinata just hurried off towards her home, no one meeting with her. Within a few seconds, he was walking beside her. She gave a startled eep and blushed lightly, pausing and pushing her fingers together. "Can I help you, Naruto?" she asked. He smirked, just slightly. Few called him Naruto. Kids in the class called him Dope, and teachers called him Uzumaki. Hinata was braver than she knew. He didn't reply though, just held out a small piece of paper. It had a name and an address. "If you want to be strong." He left it hanging. She took the paper after barely a second of hesitation. She gazed at it in surprise. "Ibiki Marino," she read. "He sounds familiar." Naruto just gave a smirk, then vanished towards his forest. Ibiki stared at the girl in surprise. The small Hyuga heiress had walked up to him a minute ago and asked for training. She was looking down and twiddling her fingers. He wondered where the hell she had gotten the courage to ask, and why him? Why not ask another Kunoichi to train her? When he had asked, she had told him Uzumaki had told her to ask him. Why the hell did that kid tell her to ask him? He knew the kid liked to watch his torturing techniques, but telling a girl to come to him specifically for training? And the Hyuga heiress at that? There was a moment of silence. Then Ibiki gave a terrifying grin as he chuckled and rubbed his hands together in glee. He'd have to thank the brat for the apprentice. Naruto watched as the months passed. He spent most of the time in his tower with Kimimaro training, gardening, or studying. The days he spent at the academy, he did practically nothing. He just showed up, so he had the minimum day requirement to pass. He didn't do much work though. Only enough to pass. He hated it when the other kids showed off, especially the Uchiha. Naruto are all about deception. That meant never showing others what you could do. Sadly, few academy students understood it. Shikamaru, Shino, Hinata, and he were the only ones to keep low profiles. Hinata had mostly done it out of shyness, but now she did it more out of knowledge. Training with Ibiki had been the right idea for her. In the 6 months, she had the nervousness and shyness beaten out of her with training. You could see the improvements, visibly. She now sat straighter and prouder. She also talked without stuttering, though she was still quiet. She didn't blush as often and would actually step forwards to do things once in a while. You could also see the way the head interrogator influenced her by her new clothes. She had nearly given everyone heart attacks when she had changed. She had even shocked her father into silence. Naruto had watched that from his spying points. She now wore her long hair in a braid like his, but tied with a metal clasp that had spikes on it. She wore black shorts that reached her knees and were scattered with pockets. She also wore a tight purple tank top over a long-sleeve fishnet shirt, both showing off her large appendages on her chest, if you get what I'm saying. She wore black combat boots with steel-tipped toes. She also had a long black trench coat on with a purple swirling flower on the back. Around her neck she wore a deep purple choker with a claw hanging from it. After the first few months of her training with Ibiki, Naruto had led her into the forest of death and left her. She had to fight her way out. When she had emerged, she had been covered in dirt, blood, and bruises. She had come out though with a huge, deep purple, almost black panther by her side. Naruto had told her sometimes the animals in the forest chose human partners. She had almost attacked him for abandoning her, but then she glared at him and nodded. He had then sat her down and put a panther tattoo on her arm made of ink, her blood, and some of the panther's blood. It was the same as his summoning tattoos, but could only summon that one panther. The tattoo also looked more striking than his symbols, but she had only one on a larger space, while he had an armful. They didn't talk often, but were allies, which was good enough for Naruto. Naruto watched the class with a blank eye as he waited patiently in the shadows of the back seats. Shino hid in the front corner by the door by himself. Hinata hid on the opposite side of Sasuke by the window. Shikamaru hid right in the middle of class, snoring on his desk. Maybe hiding wasn't the best word, it was more of being guarded or being unseen. Even though they all sat in an open lit classroom, few would notice them. They had positioned themselves like that on purpose. Where best to hide then than in plain sight. Naruto hated too much attention and most of the class knew that from his glares. They just ignored him though. Too wary of him to pay attention to him. He liked it that way. All his musing was interrupted by Iruka as the teacher stepped into the room. As the class settled down, Iruka smiled to them. Mizuki smiling beside them. Today is the final exam. Kids cheered at this. Calm down, we'll begin the day off with a written test. It's worth 20% of your mark. Kids groaned and settled down as Iruka and Mizuki passed the tests out. When Naruto got his, he calmly filled out the odd one, purposely not getting any higher than a passing grade. The second part of the exam was weapon throwing. It was also worth 20%. Naruto took 100% on his along with Sasuke, Hinata, and Shino. The third part was the taijutsu. Naruto did just enough to get a passing mark, showing off the academy-style basics in a battle against Iruka. The fourth and final part of the test was the academy jutsus. Naruto stood in front of the pair in a room separate from the class, watching both with his guarded eye. Mizuki and Iruka were tallying his other marks to figure out how much he had to do to pass. The three jutsus were worth 40% together, while the others only equaled 20% each. It used to be you had to know them to pass, but some people couldn't use chakra, i.e. Rock Lee, and they had to change the test. Iruka finally smiled up at him. You need to get at least 2 down masterfully, or all 3 adequately. Naruto gave a sharp nod and put his hands together. A moment later, he had switched with the chair. After that, he put his hands together, and in a cloud of smoke, he was a naked girl with small clouds around her areas. Iruka and Mizuki both held their noses as they gawked. "Naruto!" Iruka yelled. Naruto raised his brow. "It's a transformation," he pointed out. Iruka worked his jaw before sighing. "You are correct. Clone? I can't make the clone." Iruka shrugged. He had passed. He tossed Naruto a black Konoha headband. Mizuki sneered though. That transformation was very inappropriate, and he can't do the simplest clone. He failed. Now Mizuki, it was acceptable, and we said he only had to pass 2. Well, I won't let the demon pass, even if I have to kill him to stop him. He leapt at Naruto, a sneer on his lips, and a kunai in hand. As he reached Naruto, he prepared to slit his throat, but Naruto moved. In a movement too fast for either to see, Naruto's hand erupted through Mizuki's chest, his heart out the other side and splattering the area with blood. Naruto jerked his hand out and let the corpse drop, crushing the still beating heart in his hand. Blood drenched his arm and the edge of his black coat. Iruka turned a bit pale and clenched his eyes shut. Naruto knew the man had become a teacher to avoid killing, so he calmly walked over to the man and grabbed his arm with a non-bloody hand. He led the man out of the room and led him to his desk. The kids in the class had gone absolutely silent at the sight of a blood-drenched arms and bloody footprints. Iruka collapsed in his seat and took calming breaths. Naruto just moved to the window and drew some of his own blood across the seal on his arm. A large raven appeared in a burst of smoke and took off for the Hokage Tower. Naruto had told the old man he would send a raven when anyone ever died by his hand, unless on a mission. 5 minutes later, an Anbu came to retrieve the body and Naruto's report. Iruka also gave his report. The masked man grabbed the body and was gone. The raven who had led him here gave Naruto a caw and vanished in a plume of smoke. When he was gone, the testing started again. As Naruto sat down, everyone scooted away, giving him as much room as possible. He hadn't bothered to wash the blood off his arm. Team 7 is Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno. Iruka was cut off from a cheer by Sakura, and Naruto Uzumaki, you're under Kakashi Hatake. Sakura quieted instantly and everyone sent her pitying looks. Sasuke sent Naruto a smirk that said, I'm better than you, so you better not pull me down. He hated the Uchiha. Arrogant, boastful, show-off. No sense of secrecy or modesty. He didn't even think there was someone out there better than him. Fool. Team 8 will be Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Hinata Hyuga. Under Kurenai Yuhi. Team 9 is still in circulation. Team 10 will be Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akamichi under Asuma Saratobi. Congratulations. Kids instantly burst into cheers. Naruto gave an amused smirk. They weren't even aware that by tomorrow, only 3 teams would be left, while the rest would be either sent back to the academy or pulled from the program. Didn't they notice there were never more than 3 rookie getting teams? Sometimes even less. Take last year for example. Only 1 getting team. They were in for a disappointing shock.